Well, Coasters, it's Bruce here, and look, over the last several months, I've had various people contact me and say, "Look, Bruce, what happened to Duncan Garner? What happened to Peter Williams, Sean Plunket, John Banks, Michael Laws, Roman Travis, Tony Amos? You know that they've all disappeared." And I had a stroke of luck in that I managed to get hold of Sean Plunket. And Sean, thank you so much for joining us today.
No
It's,
problem.
it's just fantastic. Sean, what's your background? Where do you come from?
I have been doing broadcast journalism of one sort or other for about 37 years. I was born in Christchurch. I grew up in Wellington, and I went to Nelson College. I went to boarding school at Nelson College, which used to get me down the coast occasionally too, tramping and stuff at Matakitaki Lodge near Murchison. I've been there. But I spent most of my life in radio and television, and I started work, I think, 1984 in Wellington in private radio. I've worked on Fair Go, a long stint on Morning Report, did a bit of work on the Home Show. I've worked in current affairs, and I've done about 8 years in total at Parliament in various roles as a reporter as well. So I just can't find a real job, Bruce. Bruce.
Just keep trying. Now,
Yeah.
You're a pretty. I've got a family in Nelson, and I've been told you're pretty handy with the footy.
I played a couple of years first 15 for Nelson College. Mind you, I go and look at schoolboy rugby now, man. I wouldn't last 5 minutes. It's a whole new level because, you know, they're essentially working up to be professional football players. We didn't have that in my day. You know, we hadn't quite had the professional game really take off. But I enjoyed my time playing football at Nelson College, and we had last year we had a very good team, and we won what was called the quadrangular tournament, and it had been a long time between drinks, and we won every school game we played. We never lost a school match, which I think might still be an unbroken record. But man, they're playing at a whole different level these days. It's remarkable.
They're real athletes, aren't they?
Still mates. I'll tell you what, still mates with those guys. The captain of that team got remarried recently, and I got a phone call from him. I was the best man at his wedding.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
Look, tell me, Magic, why aren't you with Magic any longer? What happened? Are you allowed to say?
Oh, look, I'll say as much as I can. And look, basically, I think what happened was they had a major advertiser, which is Vodafone, threatened to pull all their advertising from MediaWorks unless they got me off the air.
You're joking?
No. And so they said, go home. We'll pay you. We just don't want you back on the radio for another year. Just go home and do nothing.
So were Vodafone a big...
no, they didn't advertise on Magic Talk, but they're a big advertiser for MediaWorks.
So who owns Vodafone?
Infratil, it's a publicly listed company. Yeah, and I had given Vodafone a few shots over some of their more woke corporate initiatives. So I just didn't fit for an advertiser. And that's the harsh reality of, though I think it's illegal that they interfered in my employment relationship with Magic Talk, and that may fold out that may progress in another forum. I'm still thinking about that. But look, I ended with the people I worked with in Magic Talks on as good a terms as possible, and I enjoyed my time there. But it's very hard to stay employed, hypothetically to stay employed with a bunch of people doing what I do and having the feeling they haven't got your back.
Is it normal for an advertiser? I mean, Vodafone have become incredibly woke in the way they do things. But, I mean, is that unusual for someone to sneak around the background and get someone given the boot?
Yes, it is. It is. But look, some people have made the comparison with a guy called Lee Williams, who was at Sinlay, right? Who got fired after saying stuff. Now, I'm not Lee Williams, and I didn't get fired, but the new reality is we have people who believe, who are so ideologically driven, that whatever they do, they are there to witch hunt and take out people who disagree with them. They don't want to have a discussion, Bruce. They want to have a witch hunt. And I think it would be fair to say, though I'm not trying to claim victimhood status here, I mean, I got cancelled. I got cancelled by wokeism.
I guess, one of the things we're all noticing is that ever since government started putting a whole lot of money into the media, things have changed. Am I being a bit suspicious, or is it?
Look, I am really concerned about the amount of government money that goes into news media. And while we can see it, what it is doing is it is starting to direct the editorial content of a lot of our news platforms. To qualify for that money, right, your organisation has to embrace the government's view of, let's take an example, of the Treaty of Waitangi. So you do not get government funding unless you have editorial policies that say we believe in the principles of the Treaty of Waitangi. So that precondition for getting the government money, of course, warps any independence that those organisations can claim in their editorial policy,
Right.
Which is quite remarkable. And it means that organisations that do not toe the government's broad philosophical line don't get government assistance. Look, to a certain extent, this is just a necessity because the media businesses and the news parts of media businesses didn't adapt quick enough to digital technology, and media organisations and their businesses didn't adapt enough. So they ran out of dough and they had to go somewhere with their hand out.
Yeah.
So that's a commercial reality. But there can be no doubt that organisations like Stuff, the Spin-Off, News Hub to a certain extent, are taking money that has strings attached, big, heavy strings, right? And, I've been doing this a long time. Actually, I'd also say, and also they now have advertisers who attach strings clearly as well because of the sort of thing that happened to me. And I don't see how you can have a news media you trust as a consumer, as a New Zealander, if someone is paying that organisation to change the way it talks to you and the stories it tells.
Sean, you've historically been known as someone who's really sort of you really speak for the man in the street, don't you?
Well, look, the longer I do this job, the less of an expert I become on anything. And I try and see things, and I do see things, simply from, ground level, like everyone else does. And I've always found in journalism that the questions you need to ask in an interview and the questions that people want asked are the obvious ones and the simple ones that come to mind. What do I want to know about this? Can you tell me this? Why can't you tell me that? And it's very simple, actually. It's not, rocket surgery, what I do. It is largely common sense and having a common perspective. I'm not writing a university essay, or a PhD thesis. I'm trying to talk with and for people to help us all understand what the hell's going on in the world.
Well, that's why so many of us followed you.
Yeah. And I don't have any greater insight than anyone else. I, like everyone else, I look at a story and say, well, what's going on there? And so you ask the question.
It appears that some of the questions you asked, they didn't want to tell you the answers.
No, and sometimes that tells you as much as an answer might, the lack of an answer,
Sean, going forward as a journalist, and soon I'd like to ask you about what your plans are, but going forward, does hate speech worry you? The
Yeah,
legislation?
quite significantly, though the indications are that even the government has come to the conclusion, whoa, this is a very, very sticky ball of wax we're getting into here. But, we have restrictions currently on what you can be sued for being nasty. We have laws of defamation, which already exist. We're not allowed to incite people to violence or to hurt other people. And I think those are reasonable laws to have.
Yeah.
What the hate speech law is actually trying to do is give special exemption from criticism for specific groups. In 37 years, I've only been pinged once by what's called the Broadcasting Standards Authority for an interview I did regarding illegal roadblocks around the country during the first lockdown. And I know that the people on the BSA desperately wanted to get me, and they wanted to be able to label me a racist. So for the first time, the BSA went and hired an academic from Victoria University, a Māori academic, to write a paper on why I was a bad person and why what I had done was wrong. Half of his report to them was withdrawn because it was basically a personal diatribe against me. But they used that to manufacture a decision against MediaWorks for my interview. And the grounds were that I conducted an interview that might have encouraged negativity or hostility towards a protected group. Right? Well, I was just doing my job. And the people who were ringing me and telling me they couldn't get to work because a bunch of locals from the local iwi or hapu had set up a roadblock and were demanding papers, half the people who rang me about that were Māori who were trying to get to their jobs. So all I was doing was sticking up for them. And at the time, the police and the government would not comment.
It was very. I followed it closely with you, and it was quite amazing. I mean, I wonder what would happen if you or I went out and blocked the road.
Well, what did happen in lockdown 1, and it happened in Macra and a place down south, police immediately turned up to rip down the roadblocks, and they were gone. Well, and that issue was never about Māori specifically. That issue was about the rule of law at an incredibly difficult time for our country, and whether or not we were going to accept vigilantes interfering with people's lives as they tried to, get to their place of work. Yeah. But you look at that example, and the way, to be honest, I was set up deliberately by the BSA for that. And I think the hate speech laws are designed to do that to everyone. That's what the ideal is, that you can take someone out and silence them by using the hate speech laws.
So if you say something about that may offend a particular group.
Yep. Or anyone who chooses to be offended, Bruce. I mean, people are very into that these days, mate. Being offended is like a national pastime for some people.
They love it, don't they?
Yeah,
Sean, did you what about the gun laws? You were hot on that at one stage?
Yeah, and look, I got to say, the fact that Tarrant got a gun license was the one thing that caused that, if he didn't have guns, that massacre would have turned out differently.
Yeah.
I think that was a political response by the government. I think a whole lot of people who had legitimate use for certain weapons have lost them, which makes their life more difficult. But I've got to say on this, anyone should be allowed to pursue their pastime, do what they want in a country as long as it doesn't pose risk to someone else. And I have to say that a lot of the people who are very vocal about their guns, when I read the nature of their comments, I was quite pleased they were losing them. But look, society and what we do are delicate balancing acts. I don't think anyone except a collector or a club member has a reason to have a weapon that is designed for military combat, right? I can't see the point. Okay. I got a couple of swords hanging on my wall. They're old antique pieces, and I quite like them. But I'm not going to run around on a horse lopping anyone's head off, So I think that was an interesting debate. I think it sparked a wider debate about how much state interference there is in our lives. And man, we're in the middle of that now with lockdown, we really are.
We're in a power of hurt, aren't we?
Yep. And I think the problem we've got now is it's not, and look, I was completely on board with lockdown 1. I think it gave us, almost a year of almost normal living, while the rest of the world, we've only lost, 28, 30 people to COVID. Remarkable. But now we've got to get out of it. We cannot go on like this. And I don't think that, I don't think anyone should be forced to take the vaccine. And because the vaccine doesn't stop you transmitting COVID or indeed catching it, it just stops you getting really, really sick when you get it, or it reduces your chances of getting really sick. I find it hard to believe that an outfit like, say, Business New Zealand is saying in large workplaces, you have to get jabbed or you could lose your job. Because an unjabbed person poses no greater risk to their workmates than a jabbed person. They can both pass on COVID and they can both catch COVID. So to my mind, that is coercion of people. And I've had the jab and I think it's safe, and I think all the stuff about ivermectin and everything is a load of codswallop. But I still think it's, it's the old saying, I might disagree with you, but I will defend to the death your right to be wrong,
Sean, it's 318 days today since there's been any transfer or community transfer of COVID-19 in the South Island, and yet we're locked down. And
you shouldn't be. It's not a practical or pragmatic response. You just
so much damage.
Yep. And look, I went out last night. First time I'd really been out, catch up with some friends since lockdown. And I talked to people in hospitality there, and they are
hurting,
even here in level 2.5. They just cannot see a way forward, and people are really stressed. And I think we have to accept, and everyone's saying, well, how many people do you think will die? Well, hopefully none. People die every day from diseases, and I don't expect the government to be able to stop people catching cancer or, developing cancer or getting the flu or getting 100 other conditions that people die from, right? The government isn't responsible for that. People get sick and die. It's a fact of life, and it's happened, since Adam was a cowboy. So we have to have a plan, I think, that says everyone has had the opportunity to get vaccinated. We can say on this date, everyone who wants to get vaccinated has had the opportunity. So if you get sick and really sick from COVID because you're not vaccinated, that is now on you. That's your personal choice. So let's open everything up and get on with it. And I think that's the only way forward.
Look, I agree. Sean, being a Wellington man, electric car?
No. Diesel V8 Range Rover Sport.
Oh, well,
I do have a couple of bikes. I use them occasionally. But look, Wellington, it's crazy. This city is cycle mad, and it is the least cyclable city in the world. It is windy and hilly. And our council, because it's dominated by, 22-year-old Greens, we are building cycleways like it's going out of fashion, and it's just ridiculous. And I see people on their bikes with the wind blowing in their face. I do think people should be able to cycle safely, but man, it's like a weird obsession in the city.
How do you feel about 16-year-olds voting?
No.
Nah.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. There's still so much going on when you're 16, and not because I want to disempower them. Life gets real in your late teens, and for a lot of people who have tougher lives, it gets real earlier. But for God's sake, don't burden them with being targeted by politicians and campaign to. Let them have, the last few, couple of years of youthful inexperience before they meet the real world. And it's been pushed by the Greens because they have an active youth voter base. So it's all bloody, it's all politics.
Completely political, isn't it? Now, Sean, you're a relatively young man. You're probably a bit over. You look like you're just a bit over 50.
I'm 57. I was 57 last week.
57.
Yeah.
Right. Oh, that's you. You're doing it right.
Yeah. I'm hanging in there. A lot of miles on the clock.
There's a lot of experience. What happens next in the life of Sean Plunket? I'm hoping like hell we don't lose you.
Well, I have, having been, and I use the term cancelled or deplatformed, and being told I'm too hot to handle and too difficult, and which is a load of dodge. But so I spent the last 6 months raising capital, and I am now in the process of building a new talkback platform.
Wow.
Streamed through the internet, a nationwide talkback platform, which will be a little different than what we've got now, because I have the chance to reimagine what a radio or a streaming platform would be like. So I don't have to make all the mistakes that everyone else has made, but we will make some. So we would hope to have that up and running and the app available for people to download for free. The app will be up in January, and we will start streaming the station, we hope, in late January, early February across the country. And it's a hell of a big project. I mean, for me, I'd go into a studio, go into an office, flick on the mic, I go home, no problem. Someone else does all the other stuff. Well, I'm just having to learn how to build a business and build those structures as well. And I got to say, sometimes it is scary as, and I feel completely out of my depth. And other times I think I'm bloody lucky that I've got a new project that I wouldn't, I guess my image was I might sit doing talkback till, Peter's age, 65, 67, and toddle off into the sunset, and play golf and fish more. But hasn't worked out that way. And I got to say, I feel kind of invigorated. It is going to be called The Platform. That is the name of it. It is called The Platform, and it's an app on your phone. We're also going to have podcasts, and we'll have, interestingly, I want to create particularly a written, if you like, web page where you can read. There are a whole lot of columnists, right, who used to be published in newspapers around the country, and they've all disappeared, just like Peter and Duncan and me.
Yeah.
Because they literally have been pushed out by the woke generation of news management and news bosses. A lot of those people are still writing on their own blogs or websites. And I really want to build a place where those voices can come together in one spot. And if you like, aggregate. We talked before I came on, we talked about the silent majority. I want to build a platform that isn't just about me spouting my views, but actually gives people who feel left out of the woke discussion the ability to come together and say what they think. And it is just as important, I think. I'm not too obsessed about whether or not Jacinda Ardern comes on my show or any politician, because I want the politicians to listen to the people who call in. It's a two-way street, and it is. And what's happened, particularly when I look at Magic and the general feeling, people who listen to and engage in talk radio have been absolutely vilified by this government. They've been called old, pale, stale, male, conservative, racist. And it has been a very clear collective attempt by the woke left to disenfranchise a whole lot of New Zealanders, to give them nothing to listen to and nowhere to have a say. And the platform is I'm actually building for those people.
Geez, I tell you what, that's totally exciting. So from a practical point of view, right, you'll be on, say, from what?
I think I'm probably going to do the breakfast show, and I'll run. I don't want to give it all away to the competition. I'll run probably 7 till 10, and I'll have a breakfast show that has more talk and it has more audience participation than anything in the country.
And so, Sean, would I ring in or would I go on my computer?
You can ring in. It'll, apart from being delivered via the internet, you'll be able to call in like a normal talkback show. Pick up your phone and dial in. And I hope to on the app, though you've got to build these things. Actually, on the app, you could just push a special button to get through.
And when can I get an app?
We hope to have the app available for download midway through January. Okay, so I've got to get a whole lot of people to get the app, and then when we go live, you push the app and you're listening to the radio station.
And so, would you be able to give me a heads up so that I can get our members?
We might even spend a little bit of money on traditional advertising, I'm thinking. And look, it's amazing, Bruce. When I looked at how do we make people aware of the app, we talk to groups like yours. I put stuff on my Facebook page and Twitter, and that's the way the world works now. I don't have to necessarily buy a whole lot of, spots in the 6 o'clock news and put billboards everywhere. I might put some somewhere, but I think the platform, and I guess talking to you now, I've done an interview with the Sunday Star Times for tomorrow. So spreading the word is just getting it out there, and the people, and I know because of the interaction I have with people like yourself, that the old Bush Telegraph is, still runs pretty strong in this country. Yeah.
Works pretty well, doesn't it? And of course, the other thing is that we're all feeling, we jump onto stuff and we see 6 woke interviews or opinion pieces from wherever. There's 6 articles on climate change every day, almost like someone said, right, you've got to put 6 in.
Bruce, I would note climate change is no longer their trendy subject because they're into the COVID, right?
Yeah.
So climate change has taken a little bit of a backseat. But yeah, they published a thing, I think about a year ago, an editorial, when they had their big apology just for being white. Remember that?
I do.
The old apology, which I just thought was rubbish.
I was so disgusted.
Yeah. But they published a sort of editorial statement of intent in which they said, we believe that the news media shouldn't just reflect what happens in a country. We should shape and change it. Now, call me old school. My dad was a journo, right? And in fact, my great-great-grandfather was a journalist. And I think my job is to reflect what's happening accurately in a country. And through the talkback medium and through social media, ask people what they think about it and debate those things and have those issues out. But I don't think I should walk into a newsroom or I should create the platform and say, the platform is going to make people think this. I mean, I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'm here to think with you and think about interesting stuff. But I'm not brainwashing.
Sure, I'm worried about this. It's sounding like democracy.
Well, we sat down, or I sat down. I sat down and thought, look, the values of what are the values of the platform? What underpins it? And words like free speech, democracy, participation, actually diversity of ideas, right? And tolerance, actually, of other people's, even their bad bloody ideas, But let's have it out and let's find out why they're bad ideas, if they're bad ideas, or they might turn out to be good ideas. But the one word I just kept on coming back to was freedom. It is about freedom of speech. And people say, oh, you can say what you want, but I'm allowed to get you fired or destroy you economically if you do, because I disagree with you. We've got to be able, there are some big discussions to be had in this country. And if it is a one-way street and the silent majority don't get to have their say and have all their views considered, people are going to get angry, because the world will change around them without them having had any input. And that's when people get, that's when bad stuff happens.
And Sean, there's a tension in even our community on the coast. There's a tension around the country at the moment, and it doesn't feel good to me. I'm quite worried about it.
Yeah, look, I think we have to be careful about the way that social media and our interaction through the internet has changed the way people perceive the world. Because I must say, I get away fishing, I get up to Turingi, I spend as much time as I bloody can out of the Beltway in Wellington. And we're still a bloody good society, Bruce. No matter the colour of your skin or your age, New Zealanders are bloody tolerant, practical, decent people. And I think a lot of New Zealanders are sick and tired of being told by people who are government commissioners or hold official positions that they're racist, or they live in a systemically racist country, or that because you're, milking some cows, you're killing the planet. And I think people are sick and tired of those negative messages because they don't actually reflect the truth of New Zealand. I think after the mosque shooting, that wasn't led by the Prime Minister. That was New Zealanders just being decent folk.
Yeah.
And we are so capable of that. And we're a small society. I think we have to be polite, because I can remember once I went out with an American woman and we went to the supermarket together. Romantic, I know. And someone knocked the supermarket trolley in there, and she turned around, ripped into it, and she hadn't been in the country. I said, no, you can't do that. And she said, well, that, mofo, bumpo thing. And I said, this is New Zealand. So you're going to meet that person in 3 days. And someone will know them. So that's why we relate to each other.
It's brilliant. I was talking to someone yesterday who visited to the coast. They've driven down to Haast. They've run out of fuel. They've walked into a house. The person gave them a fuel tank, a container, and topped it up with fuel, gave it to them and said, look, at some stage in the future when you're passing through again, could you drop it back in, because, I use it. And that was it. I mean, I got such a buzz out of it. It's still happening. There's some good people out there.
But if you were to read the Race Relation Commissioner's report, or what the Maori said, we are all terrible post-colonial oppressors. Supposedly we're always beating up and discriminating against gay people and young people and disabled people, and we're just terrible. But it's not so, and we don't buy it, and we shouldn't buy it.
It's a lot of rubbish, and some of these people that are pushing those stupid agendas should be ashamed of themselves.
Well, there's also this thing. I don't know if you've heard of the Speak Up for Women group.
No.
Advocating on issues around your ability to change your gender on your birth certificate. And they've got some concerns that women will not be safe in certain spaces, but they have been, right? And they're also, transgender athletes and stuff. Now, for various reasons, I've been to a couple of their meetings just to see what they were on about, because the transgender community, if there is such a thing, says they're all evil and they hate transgender people and they want to, kill them and stuff, and they're hateful. I went to their meetings and they were incredibly well-balanced, articulate, thought-out issues that they had to raise, and they certainly weren't hating on anyone. So I went to a meeting in Wellington, which had the Wellington City Council had tried to ban this group from using their venues, and they went to court to get the right to use the venue. And then about 150, and in the old days they would have been punk rockers and skinheads, and now they're all gay and trans and lesbian, because that's the cool thing to protest about in Wellington. They were all outside trying to shout this meeting down. And the next day, Stuff has massive reports on the protest and what happened to the protest and what the protest leaders say. And you know what? Stuff didn't bother sending a reporter into the meeting.
All about the protest.
Just one side. And I'm not saying that says anything about the group outside or inside, but it's a pretty clear example of how our news media are no longer balanced, neutral observers.
Look at what happened with the media reporting on that massive groundswell protest. It just
did that happen?
It just disappeared. And social media, of course, it was everywhere. Well, look, Sean, we'll wrap this up, but let's just go back to how we can follow you in the future.
Okay, so hopefully just before Christmas, we will have this thing called the platform. We've got a logo for it. It's already on my Facebook page. I've just thrown up the logo there for a taste.
Yep.
And that will be a radio station and a podcast site and a written site delivered through an app, which will be absolutely free to you. And I hope to have hundreds of thousands of people by this time next year listening to that. And I certainly hope that the current media players and the politicians listen so that they can maybe reconnect with the people in New Zealand.
That's the best news I've heard for a long, long time. And coasters, if you're watching this, don't panic, because I'll be keeping you connected with Sean as to when you can get your app. Go onto his Facebook page. It's just Sean Plunket. Have a look and write on your fridge the platform, because it's coming. And I tell you what, we're all going to be on it.
Well, I'll keep you folk up to date, Bruce, and thank you very much for the invite to come on today. It's been lovely talking. And
you too. Look, I'm honoured, of course, because I feel like the apprentice, well and truly interviewing the master. And you've been wonderful. I really appreciate you coming on. And if you don't mind, I'd love to do it again at some stage.
No problem, Bruce. Stay in touch.
Thanks, Sean.